everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lit with Lenin. I'm your host. We have Janet, and today we actually are doing a Georgi Dimitrov special. So we're going to have a special guest, MJ, who we just had on stream, but then we had some problems, but he's coming. So let's see if there's any messages. Hello, Milo. So
Yeah,
let's see.
Palamelo. Palamelo.
Okay. Okay, so let's see if there's anything interesting. Oh yeah, Nancy Pelosi has a ring made out of Ukrainian fascist bullets. That she and Joe Biden's in Kiev right now. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
What would he be doing? I God knows. I feel weird, like, because Zelensky is a marionette and Joe Biden's not senile, so the meeting between them will no doubtedly be very awkward, I bet you.
Yes.
Um, and let's see.
But Biden was over in Ukraine, right? During
Right
Obama.
now, he's right now in Kiev.
Yeah, but he was there during Obama
Um,
years too.
no, he was there during Maidan. Yes, he was
Yes.
the. McCain was there. Senator Chris Murphy was
Yeah.
there. They were giving speeches with that guy, with that fascist guy. I forgot his name. um, he's the head of the. It doesn't matter. There's lots of fascist guys, but yeah. So and Victoria Nuland was passing out Maidan cookies. It was like all very disgusting. So this is actually good to talk about fascism because fascism, like the very first, so Georgi Dimitrov was the first premier president leader of communist Bulgaria, and he was also implicated in the Reichstag fire. So the Reichstag fire was when the Nazis set the Reichstag building on fire and blamed the communists. And so that he was involved in this trial where he successfully defended himself against against setting the Reichstag fire. And then in 1935, he was in the Comintern. Um, he was in the Comintern, and he crafted a strategy on how to defeat fascists from the inside, like what to do if you're living inside a fascist regime, how to combat it, beat it, like what you should do, what are the kind of direct actions you can do. Because the main thing about fascism is that it takes away the state apparatus from responding to the will of the people, and it just like responds to industrialists. So that is what Georgi Dimitrov did, and it's very useful because, like it or not, a lot of you live in areas that are very close to fascism, if not already fascist. And it's not easy because they make unions illegal, they make striking illegal, they use every single method and means to break strikes, break any kind of direct action. There is no limit on what they will do. And so it is a very, very, very difficult terrain to win. And he successfully did it. And you know my motto about learning from winners. So he is somebody that we should definitely learn from since he was a winner.
Yes.
Any luck, Janet?
No, I'm not. I can't even like. He's not responding to either TikTok or here. So I don't know.
Gmail? Can you send him a Gmail?
Yeah, I sent him an email and
Okay.
um
He'll come shortly. Okay.
I
What?
don't know if, like, I know the piece is kind of long, so I don't know.
I'll
Oh,
just start
there he
the
is.
piece.
There he is.
Here he is. Okay, excellent.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay.
Okay, so here is our. No, not that way.
No, I'm
Janet.
putting myself. Hold on, Asha.
Okay.
Okay. I'm putting myself in the little box.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey. This is our guest, your commie dad, MJ. How are you doing?
Very well. How about yourself?
Excellent. I'm in St. Petersburg or Leningrad right now, so I can't really say that I'm not good. I go to this library every single day, and in the building it says, "In this building, Lenin studied," and I'm like, "Oh my
Nice.
god!" Like there's a big in 1895, and I'm just like so fangirling all the time. Like I wonder if
That has
Lenin
to be
sit.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I have to wonder, like, was Lenin sitting in this seat or that seat? I'm like trying to figure out where he was sitting so I can go sit there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And last week they let me have this book that was the original print of the Russian Social Democratic Party from 1897, and I was like, wow. Yeah, and so there they talked about how life is in Tsarist Russia, and I learned that in one factory in Kiev, people worked for 20 hours a day.
Wow.
Insane.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is. Just down the street from me at the Union Bus Factory, they work 16 hours a day, so they're not too far off.
They work right now or they worked in the past?
They do right now. Yeah.
Holy God. Okay, this
Yeah.
is like
Under
Tsarist
union.
Russia.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, are you on? Are you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good. Okay.
All right,
Okay,
cool.
so we have the whole crew here.
Yeah, so I wanna set some ground rules because this is a long piece.
Okay, what's the ground rules?
We'll have to. I'll probably be railing in some if we go off topic. I'm gonna be railing in.
Okay, you're going to be cracking the whip. Good.
I'm gonna be cracking the whip,
Okay.
and
Okay,
I'm not looking at Esha or Matt. I'm not looking in their direction at all.
okay. Definitely, we're the ones who have ADHD who are going to go way off topic. Okay, so MJ, I know your TikTok name for a long time was Read Georgi Dimitrov. So can you give us a quick introduction for people who are not familiar with who Georgi Dimitrov is and why we should read him?
Definitely. So Dimitrov is like an original anti-fascist. He's a Bulgarian communist who helped lead the first armed uprising against fascism in Bulgaria in 1923. I'm pretty sure it was 23. And it was known as the September Uprising. And anywhere from 5 to upwards to even 30,000, especially communist and others, anti-fascist, were killed in the uprising. And he helped to lead that. And he was a printer. From a very early age, he dropped out of high school or out of school, grade school, and started working, I believe, at like age 12. And he began unionizing and organizing in that trade and organized some very big strikes. One of the very first popular strikes in Bulgaria, he helped organize. He went on to be the first communist premier leader of Bulgaria. He led the Comintern at one time. He worked on the Comintern alongside of Stalin. So he had a lot of influence and he had a lot of say. He was involved in a lot of different things that were going on all over the world because of his position in the Comintern. And so he's writing letters with Tito and writing letters with Mao and every communist at the time that you can think of, he had an interaction with. And we can get a little insight, a little gleam into what was going on and why they made the decisions they made from looking at Dimitrov. And also, he wrote a lot about what fascism is. He was defining in live time what fascism means for the whole frickin' world. And he did that not just for us, but he did that to save his life and to save his comrades' lives while he sat in a Nazi prison with a death sentence hanging over his head from the Reichstag fire trial in Nazi Germany. And while he's in prison in Nazi Germany, he has a death sentence hanging over his head from his homeland in Bulgaria. And so that's what led him into hiding in Germany, essentially. And so my point in that is that you get from him a lot of that revolutionary optimism that we're lacking when we look around in today's world. When you study him, you see someone who went through tremendous things. I mean, they had him shackled, wrist to wrist, without his glasses in the Nazi prison, just, week after week after week. His spouse, his wife, she sadly, suicided at that time. He had every reason to give up hope, and he never once did. And he sat in the courtroom and he defended communism to an international court, an international audience in a Nazi courtroom. And he saved his life and likely played a big part in saving the lives of his comrades.
Excellent. Okay, so That's a very good introduction. Which piece are we reading again? I forgot.
The People's Front.
Ah, that's my favorite.
I wanted to bring up one point though. Just notice, like at the beginning, you said he was 12 and he started printing. It's always organizing and the printing. It's always those two go together.
Yeah, because you want to create your own, as Lenin says in What Is to Be Done, the main task is to create your own newspaper, because you know that the New York Times, whenever you have union strikers, they're going to put like some defamatory crap about how unions, like the bourgeois, you can never expect the bourgeoisie press to carry the truth for you, the workers.
Yeah.
That's right. And he even there's an interesting story in his autobiography where he got to flex at his boss who tried to get him to print. He was a typesetter. And so his boss wanted him to print something that was anti-worker. And he flat out refused and told the boss to go print it himself or to find somebody else to do it. And the boss couldn't. So he allowed Dimitrov to edit the paper before it went to print and take out the anti-worker, garbage. So it's a interesting tidbit from being obsessed with Dimitrov.
Okay. So can somebody share the link of the People's Front in the chat?
I just did.
Excellent. Okay.
Who do you want to read? I
can start if you guys want. Okay. Feel free to MJ. Feel free to chime in. Like, I think it's best when there's two voices. So always chime in, and I'll start reading a little bit until I get bored or tired. Okay.
Oh, right.
The People's Front by Georgi Dimitrov. The policy of the People's Front of the struggle against fascism and war, proclaimed by the 7th Congress of the Communist International, has aroused a mighty echo among the working masses of all countries. The practical realization of this policy in France and Spain has provided clear proof that the People's Front is actually possible and has enhanced its popularity. There is not a single country at the present time where the idea of a People's Front does not daily find more and more adherents among all those who cherish democracy and freedom, among all those who advocate peace among nations. The effort to form a People's Front is growing as well in countries where the bourgeoisie democratic revolution has still by no means had its last say. In Japan, for instance, where the fascist feudal military clique with its rapacious military adventures on Chinese territory and on the frontiers of the great Soviet Union, thus thrusting the Japanese people into an abyss of most terrible calamities. And it is growing also in the so-called classic countries of bourgeoisie democracy. In Great Britain, for instance, where the destinies of nations have been traditionally decided by the two parties of monopoly capital, the Tory and the Liberal, by which their reactionary policy both nationally and internationally paved the way for the burial of democracy and peace.
Can we just so when they're talking People's Front, just only because there's a People's Front that is right wing right now. So
is there a People's Front?
Well, no, there's a group that's a right wing group that calls themselves the People's Front. So we're
okay.
More like like he ended up, his party ends up being called the Fatherland Front or something, right?
Oh my God, that's in Ukraine. There's that party is like a fascist party.
Yeah. So just when he's talking about communist parties, right?
Yeah. And often like fascist parties steal communist party names because that's how they can only do it.
Exactly.
Okay. The tremendous historical significance and the correctness and timeliness of the People's Front policy. See, it's a policy. It's like a way of how to fight fascism. Are perhaps particularly clearly expressed in the attitude towards this policy shown by the enemies of the proletariat, the enemies of democracy and peace, the fascist war incendiaries, and the reactionary forces throughout the world. The government of capitalist countries, bourgeoisie parties, statesmen and politicians, bourgeoisie newspaper have all become seriously alarmed by the decisions of the Congress. The reactionaries of all countries have raised an unparalleled campaign of slander and calumny against the Communist International and against all adherents of the People's Front. In fascist Germany, they have formed a special organization called the Anti-Comintern to carry on propaganda on an international scale against Communist International and to combat the policy of the People's Front. At the National Socialist Congress in Nuremberg, Hitler, Goebbels, and Rosenberg opened a particularly furious cannonade against the danger of the People's Front, which is menacing the fascist dictatorship and against democracy in general. While directing the most vehement outbursts against the already existing People's Front in France and Spain, they at the same time thus expressed their alarm and fear of the People's Front movement, which is taking shape in Germany itself. Oh, the Pope at Rome and their graces, the bishops in different countries, hastened with epistles and sermons to shield their flock from that frightful Bolshevik danger, the People's Front. The question of the People's Front is always in the columns of the press in capitalist country and is subject to the most lively discussion. The
Do you want me to take over?
Go ahead.
Okay. The workers' class enemy quickly sensed and understood what a tremendous danger the People's Front, the unity of all anti-fascist forces, constitutes for him. As long as the proletariat is disunited, as long as it is isolated from the other strata of toilers, the working people in town and country, as long as it has not established proper relations and collaboration with the other democratic forces in the country, it is not so difficult, as the examples of Italy, Germany, and Austria have shown, for the handful of financial and industrial magnates, for the fascist bourgeoisie, to crush the working class movement, to defeat the various strata of the people one by one, and destroy democracy. The fascists have successfully applied the well-known crafty motto, divide and rule.
Okay, quick question. What does he mean by who constitutes the anti-fascist forces, at least in relation to what he did?
Unity of the unity of all. For them, I mean, it was basically anyone who was.
Well, the anti-Comintern was Germany, Italy. He mentioned Rosenberg up here. That's
Right.
Estonia.
No, yeah, Alfred Rosenberg.
Yeah.
He was a Baltic German. No. I'm saying with regards to anti-fascist force. So, was it just everyone who was opposed to fascism, basically?
I mean, in reading the piece below, we'll find out.
Okay. Let's continue.
But
yes.
I also, we should mention too, this is written in the mid 30s, right?
1935.
Oh, I thought it was 37.
So it's it's prior to like the Spanish insurrection.
No.
In
It was
36.
during the Spanish Civil War.
It was during the Civil War. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, so just to keep that all in context, that this is prior to World War II.
Yeah.
But when the scattered proletarian detachments, at the initiative of the communists, join hands for the struggle against the common enemy, when the working class, marching as a unit, begins to act together with the peasantry, the lower middle classes, and all democratic elements on the basis of the People's Front program, then the offensive of the fascist bourgeoisie is confronted with an insurmountable barrier. A force arises which can offer determined resistance to fascism, prevent it from coming to power in countries of bourgeois democracy, and overthrow its barbarous rule where it is already established. As the examples of France and Spain have shown, the establishment of the People's Front signifies a turning point in the relation of forces between the proletariat on the one hand and the fascist bourgeoisie on the other, to the advantage of millions of the working masses. The People's Front makes it possible for the lower middle classes, the peasantry, and the democratic intelligentsia not only to resist the tutelage and oppression of the clique of finance capital, but also to rise up against it in defense of their vital interests and rights, relying for support on the militant collaboration of the working class nationally and on an international scale. The People's Front offers a way out of the situation which seems so hopeless to the sections of the lower middle classes who considered themselves doomed to submission to fascist domination. The People's Front helps the working class to avoid the political isolation towards which the bourgeoisie purposefully impels it. It creates the most favorable conditions for the working class to accomplish its historic role, to head the struggle of their people against the small clique of financial magnates, big capitalists, and landlords, to be in the vanguard, in the uncompleted democratic revolution, and in all movements for progress and culture. The class struggle between exploited and exploiters thus receives an immeasurably wider base and mighty scope.
What's really nice is that two things. He talks about how they tend to how the big bourgeoisie tend to isolate the working class. And we've seen this in America. They've done this through suburbs, not having public transportation, and so on. And the second one is knowing that he's won, like they've won. So it is possible to win.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's it exactly. We have actual concrete examples of winning.
Yeah.
Lost where we're at.
Okay, here, let me read. When the split in the ranks of the working class, in the absence of unity between them and the other strata of the working people, paved the way to power for fascism, the unity of the proletarian ranks and the formation of the People's Front ensure victory for democracy over fascism. Defend peace against fascist incendiaries of war, and in the long run pave the way for the victory of labor over capital. It is difficult to imagine a higher degree of political short-sightedness and absurdity than to contrast the principles of class struggle with our policy of the People's Front, as some of our overzealous critics from the left do in regard to the decisions of the 7th Congress of the Communist International. We frequently observe the characteristic phenomenon that not a few left socialists who have become disillusioned with the social democratic policy of class collaboration with the bourgeoisie and are moving away from reformism are frequently inclined to go to the other extreme and become the victims of sectarianism and leftist excesses. They make the mistake of identifying the policy of the People's Front with the policy of class collaboration with the bourgeoisie and demand a pure working class policy, declaring that the joint struggle of the working class and the democratic sections of the lower middle classes, the peasantry, and intelligentsia against fascism constitute a retreat from the position of the class struggle. But this does not at all mean that the People's Front policy is identical with the policy of class collaboration with the bourgeoisie. It only shows that we must patiently explain the class meaning of the People's Front policy to the sincere left socialists and help them to get rid of their own political short-sightedness, which can only play into the hands of fascism and reaction in general.
Yeah, so I felt like that answered your question. Like, we're not playing with the liberals.
Exactly. And you know what? This kind of reminds me of like the modern, there are some people who may call themselves Maoists, but their like modern critique of China is like Dengism. And this is like, these left critiques in 1935 is like crazily familiar, it seems very eerily similar to the critiques of like quote unquote Dengism to me.
Right. And I like how he points out a little bit further back about how we need to be involved in all of the advances in progress and culture and support them. And I think that that's one thing that this piece kind of touches on right there. It shows an argument against class reductionism that we hear today.
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen both extremes where people are class reductive or like ethnic race reductive, and they're both equally anti-dialectical.
Right. Definitely, yeah. People like they're pointing out people go from one extreme to the other, trying to get away from one extreme and up in the other.
Well,
Yeah.
trying to avoid like an actual proper class analysis, which becomes like rather inconvenient. So you end up with the I hate the term like race reductionism because it's like never used on anything that's like genuinely race reductionism, or reductive would probably be a better word than reductionism itself. But like usually that's used to like you dare suggest that racism might be a problem.
Of course, it's a problem.
Yeah, you know, it's never used to like as like an honest bit of critique. Like,
You know, it's always a problem. It always has been a problem, and it, but um, one thing though is like now in regards to fascists, like we can show the concentration camps and how show it. Like back then, they didn't have the concentration camps and the Nuremberg trials, so uh, so it was like a harder thing to look forward without the future of how horrific fascism could be.
right. So do you want me to
Go
pick
ahead.
up from here?
We're in section 2.
Yeah. All right. As stated at the 7th Congress of the Communist International, the People's Front will be formed in a different way in different countries, depending on the historical, social, and political peculiarities of each country and the concrete situation existing therein. To imitate uncritically and transfer mechanically the methods and forms of the People's Front in one country to another can only complicate its formation, expansion, and consolidation. However, as experience has shown, it is equally true for the majority of the capitalist countries that, first, the formation of the People's Front is possible in the actual struggle today against fascism. Second, the People's Front will be realized the more rapidly, and the sections of the working masses joining it will be the greater, the more determinedly the working class itself acts as one unit. The more quickly its organizations, and in the first place the mass trade unions and the communist and social democratic parties, bring about unity of action in the struggle against fascism. Third, the People's Front will spread and strengthen as its programs for the defense of the interests of the working people, for the defense of democracy and peace against fascism and the fascist warmongers is carried out. Fourth, the success of the People's Front is entirely dependent upon the extent to which its ranks are consolidated and upon the extent to which the masses and organizations which take part in it have undergone political and organizational preparation so as to be ready promptly to repulse every blow aimed by fascism without waiting for its general offensive. Today, when the Spanish people is engaged in a deadly struggle against the fascist rebels, when fascism is raising its head everywhere in the capitalist countries, and in the first place in France, Czechoslovakia, and Belgium, it is the supreme duty of the working class to hasten in every way the formation and consolidation of the People's Front by establishing united action nationally and on an international scale. It is the duty of communists to do everything necessary, taking into consideration the conditions in their own countries, to help the working class to fulfill in its historic task. If we are briefly to formulate the most important immediate tasks which the whole situation today places before the world proletariat, they may be reduced to the following, quote, to exert every effort to help the Spanish people to crush the fascist rebels, not to allow the People's Front in France to be discredited or disrupted, to hasten by every means the establishment of a People's Front of struggle against fascism and war.
I have one quick comment. So I don't know if you guys know, but in France, the People's Front was able to form a government with Leon Blum, and the elites actually had a slogan that says "Puto Hitler, Popular Front." Like it said, like better Hitler than the Popular Front. And so I always have a theory that France surrendered on purpose. The elite surrendered on purpose, but
well, the government absolutely, like they waited until the Nazis had like 1 foot like over the border and then just like gave up. The People's Front, like pretty much like the non-government militias, never surrendered really to the Nazis. The French resistance kept going until like the war was over, or they were all dead, depending on where they were. But no, the government absolutely like the collaboration through instant surrender.
Okay, let's continue.
All right. All these tasks are closely linked. The most urgent, though, of these tasks, the first at the present moment, is that of organizing international aid to the Spanish people for their victory over fascism. That's depressing. The course of development in all the capitalist countries in the near future will depend a great deal upon the outcome of the struggle of the Spanish people against the fascist brigands. The action undertaken by the fascists in Spain has shown once more that fascism is not only the bitterest enemy of the proletariat, the enemy of the Soviet Socialist republics, but the enemy of every form of liberty of every democratic country, even if its political and economic regime does not go beyond the bounds of bourgeois society. Fascism means the destruction of all democratic rights won by the people, the establishment of a kingdom of darkness and ignorance, and the destruction of culture. It means nonsensical race theories and the preaching of hatred of man for the purpose of kindling wars of conquests. Death and destruction are being spread today in Spain by the rabble who form the Foreign Legion, by the duped Moroccan troops led by fascist generals, and by the ammunition and military units sent to Spain by the fascist rulers of Germany, Italy, and Portugal. The combatants of the Republican Army fighting at the walls of Madrid and Catalonia, in the mountains of the Asturias, all over the peninsula, are laying down their lives to defend not only the liberty and independence of Republican Spain, but also the democratic gains of all nations and the cause of peace against the fascist war incendiaries.
Okay, so you know what's fun? Like, I just reading about what fascism means: establishment of a kingdom of darkness, ignorance, and destruction of culture. It means nonsensical race theory and the preaching for hatred of man for the purpose of rekindling wars of conquest. That sounds very familiar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all seen like the Russian phrenology memes going around Twitter, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they saw this even before it was as bad as it was. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So why are we not?
Yeah, I know. I wondered that too, and a lot of people didn't see it until like until Barbarossa began, and they were like systematically exterminated. So,
well, I mean, he's also describing like beat for beat the entire domestic and foreign policy of the United States between 1899 and right this moment when this was printed. So I mean, it's not like there weren't hints.
Yeah, I know exactly. I mean, so I just think that there's too much. My theory is that there's not enough dialectical materialism because people in the United States have too many commodities, and so there's no reason for there's enough people who don't have a reason, and the people who do have a reason are too isolated to form a united front. That's my theory.
Interesting.
That's fair. The special significance of the Spanish events consists in the fact that they have demonstrated the mighty power of united proletarian action, the power of the People's Front in the struggle against fascism. For it is now quite clear to everybody that if the united action had not been achieved between communists, socialists, and anarchist workers in Spain, if a broad fighting front of the Spanish people, from the communists to the left Republicans, had not been formed, the fascist generals would long ago have established their dictatorship. They would have wreaked bloody vengeance upon the workers and other toilers and upon all democratic elements all over the whole of Spanish territory. They would have doomed the country to an orgy of medieval reaction and inquisition, would have placed it under the heel of German and Italian fascism, would have handed over to them the most important strategic points in the Mediterranean, and have turned Spain into a military base for carrying out their robber war plans. But in Spain, the fascist rebels and their inspirers from Berlin and Rome have encountered the force which is barring their way. They have encountered the armed resistance of the People's Front. The Spanish, by their heroic struggle, are today demonstrating how democracy is to be defended against fascism. The victory of the Spanish people, it is the interest of all who do not want to suffer fascist barbarism in their country. The victory of the Spanish people will be the victory of the whole of world democracy, the victory of progress and culture over fascist reaction, the victory of the peace, the People's Front in France, and strike a heavy blow at fascism in all countries. The heroic struggle of the Spanish people serves as a striking and convincing warning to the fascist forces of darkness in those countries where they are feverishly preparing for fascist coup d'etat. At the time has that the time has passed when fascism can make use of disunity in the ranks of the working class and other toilers, when it can catch the people unawares, when it can deceive the politically backward sections of the population and seize state power. It shows that where there are a firm People's Front and international solidarity of action among the working class, it will be impossible to establish fascist rule over a people prepared to defend their freedom and independence. Thus, the cause of democracy and peace in Europe, the struggle against fascism and war in all countries, is linked in 1,000 ways with the interests of the People's Front in Spain, whose courageous fighters have taken up arms to defend the Republic and ensure the victory of the Spanish Revolution. That is depressing. That is so depressing.
Well, I mean, yes, unfortunately, in Spain, the fascists prevailed for a whole host of reasons, but the fascists lost in the bigger fight with the Soviet Union.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. And just for the record, that the whole host of reasons that the Spanish Civil War went in favor of the fascists had absolutely nothing to do with a massive inventory of munitions that were sent to the anarchists in Spain. Like I have a whole inventory of that, and it's actually it causes me a cluster headache to actually fathom that they lost with all this artillery.
Well, a lot of times it was because they were just not very organized. For example, like there was this one group in the south that went the wrong direction to meet Franco's troops instead of like coming towards Catalonia to stop them, like uniting with. There was just a lot of disorganization, basically.
Yeah, and a surprisingly large amount of organization when it came to shooting at the Soviets.
Yeah.
This is a very optimistic take a year before everything went to shit, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
MJ,
Yeah.
do you wanna start section 3?
Sure.
We're doing good on time, so
Oh, that's good.
we'll allow a little bit more discussion.
Okay.
I should have brought my materials about the depressing outcome of the Spanish Civil War, but I did not. So I'll yield my time.
Next time.
Hold on. Okay, let's just read one comment. Okay. Absolutely, that's exactly what happened at the final offensive of the Spanish Civil War. Even George Orwell describes how poor the training and military discipline was in the CNT 5 forces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And here in Russia, like here, the two republics, LNR and DNR. So with Lugansk, the very first day, they actually, way back in 2014, they actually captured a Ukrainian. Actually, captured is basically back then the Ukrainian police just like handed them over the weapons, and then even the State Department admits that that's why they had to bring in the fascists, because the Ukrainian police just was like, okay, have fun. But then they actually, it shows you like how they organized themselves to like single-handedly fight off like aerial raids when they were undermatched, and they did this for 8 years. and they were able to, and thankfully unfortunately they only got half of the oblast, but that half of the oblast they were able, like they're running schools, children have food, and they're not getting bombed, and they're not getting tortured by like Nazi death squads, which is more than what was going on in the other half. So I'm just saying that even today you can see how the difference between having a good anti-fascist front like in Lugansk versus a not very good one. The Lugansk. The main difference is in the Lugansk Oblast immediately declared independence and they got their militia together and started fighting. Odessa delayed in declaring independence and getting their militia, and they got massively slaughtered. It's horrific. Just search the Odessa fire.
Oh, so I found my inventory of arms sent to Republican Spain from the Soviet Union between 1936 and 1939. This comes from 3 different sources. First being the most extensive source is called International Solidarity with the Spanish Republic.
And remember, the Soviet Union back then was a third world country. So
this was before industrialization.
Yeah. You have to think of it more like, imagine it's like I don't know. It's the equivalent of, say, India today sending weapons to Spain.
Yeah.
No, not India.
No, not India.
Worse than India. Something like Cambodia sending weapons to Spain.
Well, not even Cambodia.
Fine.
I mean, no. So the Soviet Union is pre-industrial.
Okay, so it would be something like Malawi sending weapons.
Yeah, much closer.
Spain. Yeah.
So this is the most extensive one. This is from International Solidarity with the Spanish Republic, published in Moscow in 1974. So 806 aircrafts, 362 tanks, 120 other armored vehicles, 1,895 pieces of artillery, 15,113 machine guns. Can you hear me?
Asha?
Hello?
Oh, hold on, Matt. Asha? I don't know why she's not hearing. Hold on.
You can hear me though, right?
Yeah, all right, you keep talking and I'll get
I got my audio fixed, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so 15,113 machine guns, 500,000 rifles, 110,000 bombs, 500,000 grenades, 3.4 million rounds of ammunition, 862 million cartridges. I don't know what the difference between a cartridge and a round here is. I'm assuming they mean like as in artillery shells, I think. But there's 862 million.
Hold like so many rounds.
Well, that would be a magazine.
Oh,
okay. Maybe it's for different weapons.
Possibly. Either way, there's 862 million of them.
Wow.
And 1,500 tons of gunpowder. And that's a more extensive one than the other Soviet source and from G. Housen in a book called Arms for Spain, The Untold Story of the Spanish Civil War, published in London in 1998. But for pretty much like everything after the rifles is what the other 2 sources don't keep track of, but the numbers for everything before that pretty much match up. They actually cite that more machine guns were sent, though they have less artillery citations, but pretty much the numbers are effectively the same. I mean, honestly, what's the difference between 1,895 pieces of artillery and 1,100?
Right. Well, now I'm thinking that maybe they should have been sent to Belarus, where they could have probably saved a few million lives.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually
because the Belarusian partisans were amazing. They literally exterminated 607 villages or something crazy like that. Like everyone died.
25% of the Belarusian population.
Yeah. And then, like, yeah, they just exterminated every single person in the village.
I don't think there was a more extensive genocide perpetrated in a single country until the United States invaded Korea.
Probably, exactly. It was horrific what they did. Like, they just killed entire. Like, Come and See is a good movie, and it's not that different from reality.
No.
All right. So, MJ, do you want to start reading chapter 3 or
Section
Definitely.
3.
Sure. Everything that has happened during the recent period, and primarily the lessons of the Spanish events, point to the fact that the time has come when we must defend democracy by every means, including the force of arms. These are the lessons that must be learned and well remembered by all workers and other toilers, by all those who do not want to become victims of fascist bondage and savage violence. It is not at all that the supporters of democracy and peace are in general advocates of armed struggle, but that fascism kindles the flames of civil war against the democratic regime of the country, brings about destruction and death, and compels the people to defend their lives, their freedom and independence by taking up arms. It must be understood that it is not a case now of some far distant menace of fascism, but that fascism, which has already set up its terroristic dictatorship in such big countries as Germany and Italy, and is seeking to do the same in Spain, is preparing to crush the working class movement and to destroy democracy in other countries, and that it kindles the flames of world imperialist war. The war undertaken by fascism against the Spanish people cannot be considered as a casual, isolated act. No, this war is linked to the chain of the fascist offensive on the international arena. No illusions must be harbored that the war undertaken by fascism against the Spanish people will be the last of its kind. Fascism is preparing to strike at democracy in France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, at the democracy of England, Switzerland, Scandinavia, and other countries. Everywhere the fascist reactionaries are feverishly working from within and without to prepare, organize, and at a convenient moment to carry out fascist rebellions and coup d'etat. In order to prepare for a new imperialist war, to seize foreign territories and to subject other nations, in order to ensure the unbridled rule of the most reactionary, rapacious elements of finance capital, and to organize a crusade against the Soviet Union, fascism needs to smash the working class movement and destroy European democracy. All adherents of democracy must bear in mind that the fate of anti-fascist democracy in Europe is inducibly bound up with the fate of the working class, with the establishment of the People's Front. Democracy will inevitably perish under the blows of the fascist offensive if it does not rely for support on the working class and the broad masses of working people. If it is not prepared to defend itself against fascism by every means at its disposal. The policy of retreating before fascism, both nationally and on an international scale, brings grist to the mill of fascism. It brings destruction to the nations. It means the end of democracy. This policy is equally harmful for those who retreat before fascism inside the country and those states which retreat before it on the international arena. The fascist rule of Germany are systematically blackmailing the countries of bourgeois democracy, and the present rulers of those countries succumb to the influence of this blackmail. But it must be realized that the brazen fascists are becoming the more insolent, the more concessions are ceded to them, and the less the resistance they meet.
Can I stop
The
you right there?
fascist,
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question there? Like, so, yeah, like he's putting it like the other countries that were receiving, Italy and Germany, like putting out their stuff, but I feel like the other countries didn't like communists just as much. I mean,
No. You're right. That's why. Okay, for example, I'll give you the example of Czech Republic. So the Soviet Union actually in like 1938 spoke to the Czech Republic and said, "Hey, we can send over X amount of troops to stop Germany from taking Sudetenland." But Beneš, the leader of the Czech Republic, did not want to act because he feared communists more, unless like England and France actually came in and saved him, and England and France stabbed him in the back. And so, yeah, in fact, the thing that we have to kind of remember is right after World War One, a lot of these countries are not real countries, but fake countries created by the Versailles Treaty, where like England, France, and America get together and just draw the lines. And so they installed fascists very close to fascists in Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and these were fascist before Germany. So, and a lot of times the West loves to ignore this fact that in like 1919, right after, because the Bolshevik Revolution scared them so much, they created all these like fascist countries as a bulwark against Bolshevism. And so there were like Germany and Italy were the biggest, but they were not the first. And so together they were able to form like a strong front right there.
right? And this piece helps define for us, like, everybody always says, what is fascism? It's so hard to define. And it's defined as one word, anti-communism.
Yep, anti-communism. And I also like to talk about, just read my piece, Economy of Evil, because it sounds like early stages of fascism sounds a lot like Ronald Reagan on steroids. And so it should be very familiar to Americans.
Right, definitely. So the fascist, sorry, I just hit a button and screwed up my phone. Okay, there we go. The fascists are using their well-tried method of provocation. In Germany, they burned the Reichstag and then shouted that the communists had done it. In Spain, they started a rebellion against the parliamentary regime, against the lawful Republican government, and then shouted that the People's Front was to blame for the Civil War. The fascists put fear into the hearts of the spineless liberals and flabby Democrats, while the Democratic jobbers, fearing for their profits, and ministers, politicians, and leaders from the ranks of various liberal and Democratic parties who cling to their soft seats, as well as not a few people from the Socialist and Amsterdam Internationals, give way to this intimidation and do their utmost to find means of conciliation with fascism. They try to persuade us that such a middle policy can be adopted, whereby the wolves would be satisfied and the sheep go unharmed. But concessions will not sate the fascist wolves. This kind of policy will not check them. Actually, it only leads to demobilizing the forces and the will of the working masses.
Do you want to keep going or
hold on, that's exactly what they did in a lot of the like in France, and that's why that's why there's like a house in Stalingrad that lasted longer than almost every European country, because they demobilized their strongest working class. They did this in almost every country in Europe.
Yeah. Do you want to keep right in, or somebody else can take over if you?
I can take over.
It doesn't matter to me.
You want to go for a little bit, Matt? Okay.
Yeah, sure. All right. The Spanish events provide a particularly vivid example in this respect, too. It is clear to all that the fascists, and first and and first and foremost the fascists of Germany and Italy, who have raised the revolt with the Spanish generals at their cat's paws, counted upon the young Spanish Republican government not offering them any serious resistance. They expected that it would not be difficult for them to subject the country and take over its natural wealth and the islands that have strategic importance. In resorting to military action in Spain, the fascists had before them the examples of the recent past, when their criminal acts had been allowed to go unpunished, the introduction of compulsory military service in Germany, the militarization of the Rhineland, the seizure of Ethiopia by Italy, and the earlier seizure of the parts of China by Japan, which took place with the connivance of the bourgeoisie. The appetites of the fascist bullies and encouraged them to attempt a new robber raid. The fascists would never have dared to kindle the flames of civil war in other countries, to send armed airplanes, tanks, flotillas of warships, and lastly, army units had they been promptly and firmly checked.
Interesting parallel to Ukraine today, but let's continue.
Go figure. Well, let's all pat ourselves on the back for Minsk too. They would have been compelled to retreat if, at the very beginning of the fascist rebellion in Spain, they had encountered the mighty force of the international working class movement marching in a united front, if they had encountered resistance on the part of the bourgeois democratic governments, if these governments had not supported the blockade of the Spanish Republic by the fraudulent policy of non-intervention. We often hear the argument advanced by people who pretend to be adherents of democracy that the establishment of the People's Front only leads to increased fascist aggression, that it hastens the armed action of fascism. From this, they draw the conclusion that if you want to avoid the barbarous rule of fascism, do not form a People's Front, but try to come to terms peacefully with Hitler and Mussolini and your own Hitlers and Mussolinis in each country. But nothing could be more misguiding and harmful for the proletariat and the people in the bourgeois democratic countries than to follow the sheepish wisdom of these woebegone Democrats. It amounts to the absurd, stupid, foul moral, quote, don't annoy the beast if you don't want it to attack you, end quote. And this monstrous moral is being taught to the social democratic workers precisely after the cruel defeat of the working people of Germany and Austria. For in Germany...
Can I? We see the same debate going on in the United States with the rise of the so-called alt-right. You know, the Democrats and liberals here, they argued against us even going out, into the streets and protesting them. You know, they didn't. They accuse us of instigating the violence of Charlottesville and so on.
Yeah, I woke up to see a joke, the New York Times pitch bot on Twitter saying, like, I was a lifelong Democrat until a character in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory gave me their pronouns.
I mean, you see that exactly. Like the Democrats, like they are so concerned about the civil rights of hypothetical Nazis.
Mm-hmm. But it's like, they'll sit there and say to me, like, oh, because you're talking about X, Y, or Z, like racism. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about racism, so that's why there is racism.
Yeah, right.
No, that's not how that works.
No.
Right.
I wish my speech would manifest into reality, and I could just be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Alas, I am not a genie.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just check on. Hold on. Let's just look at any other comments we should. Okay. So this takes place during the Ethiopia offensive.
Yes. So that was 35. So yeah. Mm-hmm. That's when Italy went in.
Yugoslavia in 1940. So we wrote an article about this, but Yugoslavia was a moderate democratic country. But then the Catholic Church kind of sent in a lot of fascists undercover and did a lot of arranging inside the Catholic churches. And then in 1941, they fell in about 8 days to one of the most brutal regimes, which is the Ustazi, led by Ante Pavlic.
Mm.
Yep. the USSR offered to send troops to Czechoslovakia to save it from the Munich Agreement.
Yep. Didn't Stalin at one point like offer to send in troops to striking miners in Alabama?
No, he said he wished he could. He didn't really offer.
Okay.
He said he wished he could, but alas, he can't because it's not practical.
Yeah.
You were comparing what the piece was saying about all the arms and ammunition being sent from the U.S. and other places over to Ukraine. Heck, down the road from me, I live in Oklahoma, in the United States, and we have Ukrainian troops that are training here in Oklahoma on the Patriot system.
Yeah, I've heard that. That sounds really psycho, and yeah.
Yeah.
So where in Oklahoma are you at? I grew up about an hour away from Tulsa.
Oh, okay. I'm in Tulsa.
Oh,
I moved here from Michigan. I'm a Michigander, but I moved
I'm
here.
from Michigan too. We're in Michigan.
All right. Well, all right.
Put up your hand and show the mitten.
I'm here, Kalamazoo.
All right. Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I spent 7 years just recently, right in the middle in Alma.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I grew up in the Ozarks, so like technically in Arkansas, but like just over the border.
Oh, okay.
In the
Does Arkansas have a border with Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oklahoma to the east, Missouri to the north, Texas to the south, Tennessee to the east.
Yep.
It's kind of mountainy over there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part that's almost like a Four Corners where it's like Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana like all like hit together. Mm-hmm. Like it's right around they have the river delta area where like most of the prisons are now, which also used to be like a big source of like most of the agricultural slavery in the United States. Weird how there's a perfect overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
For in Germany and Austria, as is well known, the leaders of social democracy and the trade unions had absolutely refused to undertake any joint action with the communists, their excuse being that the united front with the Communist Party would alienate the middle strata from the working class. That sounds familiar. Would strengthen the middle position of the aggression of fascism and would hasten on its general I got something in my eye. All that. Okay. And would hasten on its general offensive and lead to the fascist victory and the annihilation of democracy. It was as a result of this policy that the German and Austrian people suffered heavy defeats, followed by countless horrors and calamities. On the other hand, we see that the People's Front in France has barred the way against fascism, while it is precisely owing to the People's Front that for 5 months now, the Spanish people have been heroically defending their liberty and independence. In this grave struggle, the chances for victory will be the greater the more the Spanish working class is able to maintain to the end of the firm unity of the People's Front, the more it is able to subordinate the historically formed differences between the communists, socialists, and anarchists to the greater interests of the people, to the cause of suppressing the fascist rebellion, the more determinedly it resists the attempts at taking dangerous leaps over the inevitable stages of the revolution advocated by certain short-sighted sectarians, light-minded visionaries, and Trotskyite provocateurs. Finally, the quicker and more resolute the support afforded to the Spanish people by the world proletariat and the whole of progressive mankind, the sooner will the Spanish people finish with the fascist rebels. An analogy, it is true, is not always proof, but frequently it throws a clearer light on a given situation. We can definitely assert that if, at the time of the Leipzig trial, when the sword of brutal Hitler fascism hung over the heads of the accused communists, the anti-fascists of all countries, and we in court had adhered to this wiseacre policy of don't annoy the beast, German fascism would not then have suffered such a moral and political defeat. The heads of the falsely accused communists would not have remained on their shoulders, and the St. Bartholomew night prepared by the bloodthirsty fascists for the thousands of prisoners of fascism in the jails and concentration camps would not have been averted. No, the policy of don't annoy the beast is an unworthy policy. It is a policy which, under all circumstances, is fatal for the working class, for democracy and peace. On the contrary, the fascist beast must be muzzled. It must be confronted by the mighty organized fist of the People's Front. It must be muzzled in iron so as to prevent it from biting. It must be struck at the finish. It must be struck at and finished once and for all in order to save the democratic gains won by the people and safeguard peace. This, of course, does not mean that we should fall prey to the provocations of the fascists who, while using all means to kindle the flames of civil war inside the country and imperialist war abroad, seek to deceive the masses of the people and create the impression that it is precisely the parties of the People's Front and the states which support peace that lead to civil war and military complications. In the contemporary political history of Europe, we have two most important and instructive examples showing different attitudes towards fascism that led to diametrically opposite results. While in Germany, the social democratic leaders refused to establish united working class action, and precisely because of this facilitated the advent of the fascists to power, we have a different example in France. The French proletariat, thanks to the joint action of the communist and socialist parties and the policy of unswerving struggle on the basis of the People's Front against the fascist danger, caused fascism to be effectively repulsed and prevented the fascists from establishing their rule. This is the greatest victory of the proletariat and democracy in Europe after the coming of fascism to power in Germany, and the working people of other capitalist countries can and must learn from the French proletariat. Wow, that is like milk.
Okay, so they did delay it for a few years. Unfortunately, the problem was that the Popular Front was not strong enough, and they did not infiltrate enough of the military and stuff like that. So that's why at the end they kind of capitulated. But that's okay.
But the successes in France are only the first success.
Yes.
Well, are just like let me backtrack again. The best French political figure or to learn from in like recent like revolutionary history or relatively recent, I suppose, is Robespierre. Do like everything Robespierre did,
Except for getting beheaded.
Yeah, except for getting beheaded at the end, and you'll get close enough. Like even if you last as long as Robespierre did and still get beheaded, you'll be doing better than they did against the fascists. Because as bad as the Thermidor reaction was, it wasn't what Vichy France brought in.
Yeah. Let me read. Okay, but these successes in France are only the first successes. They must be consolidated. They demanded that the offensive against fascism proceed further. Every attempt to discredit and break up the People's Front must meet with the most resolute resistance on the part of all workers, all anti-fascists. The mustering of fascist forces within the country, the growing fascist aggression in neighboring countries, the Spanish events, which are fraught with lessons to be learned, indicate clearly to the workers that all anti-fascists that they must increase their effort tenfold in the struggle against fascism, that they must forge an even stronger and more stable united People's Front. There is no ground to doubt that this line will be followed persistently and firmly as the only correct line in the struggle against the growing fascist aggression. But maintaining the People's Front in France does not mean by far that the working class will support the present government at any price. The composition of the government may change, but the People's Front must remain and grow stronger all the time. If for some reason or another the existing government should turn out to be unable to put through the program of the People's Front, if it takes a line of retreat before the enemy at home and abroad, if its policy leads to the discrediting of the People's Front and thus weakens their resistance to the fascist offensive, then the working class, while still further strengthening the bonds of the People's Front, will strive to bring about the substitution of another government for the present one, of a government which will firmly carry out the program of the People's Front, which will be capable of dealing with the fascist danger, will safeguard the democratic liberties of the French people, and ensure its defense against foreign fascist aggression. Alongside with maintaining and strengthening the People's Front in France, the unfolding of united action among all sections of the English working class against fascism and war deserves special attention. England plays a tremendous role in the whole of the political life of the world. Her position must definitely influences a number of bourgeoisie democratic countries and the international situation in general. The whole situation today raises with particular force the question of the role of the working class of England nationally and on the international scale. This fact imposes on it particularly important obligations with regard to the struggle against fascism and for the preservation of peace, and also with regard to the task of establishing international unity of the class movement. The English working class won democratic rights earlier than the working people of other countries. The democratic regime they won has made it possible for them to influence the policies within their country to the greater extent than is the case with proletarians in a number of other countries. The English workers possess powerful means for the struggle for democracy and to safeguard peace against fascism, and in particular against the fascist brigands in Spain and the German, Italian, and Portuguese interventionists. There is no doubt that the working class of England, within the glorious traditions of the Chartist movement behind it, the proletariat in midst of the first international of Marx and Engels was established, and which possesses powerful united trade union organizations, will find itself sufficient strength and willpower to overcome all obstacles on the way to creating a united people's front of struggle against fascism and war, and to fulfill with honor its international obligations in defense of democracy, culture, and peace.
Yeah, it's weird to think it's when you get into this, you have to also realize that England was the stronger power over United States then at that point, like in Europe at least.
No, I mean England had all the colonies back then, like it had like 2/3 of the world. So yes, at that point England was England was not little island, it was like half the world basically.
So you almost have to take this and think of it as US instead of England. Like now it's US's role is what they're saying here.
Yeah.
Or like we yeah. Just to look at it that way. Do you want to keep reading, or you want MJ to read for a little bit?
MJ can read it for a little bit.
Okay.
The decisive role in the task of establishing a mighty people's front belongs to the working class. It can and must rally around itself all working people, all the forces of democracy, all anti-fascists. At the present juncture, when we are faced with furious fascist aggression directed, as was particularly clearly demonstrated by the Nuremberg Congress of the bestial German fascists, against every kind of democracy, when everything must be done to save the Spanish Democratic Republic, when over the world hangs the ominous threat of a new world imperialist war, it is not only impermissible to allow the forces of the proletariat to be divided, but it is impermissible and criminal to allow any slackening in the work of establishing the united front. This slackening only plays into the hands of fascism. It may cause the proletariat and democracy to suffer new heavy blows. The working class.
I have a quick question. So in the above, they use italics too for a certain portion when he's explaining, the people, people's front being formed, but he uses italics here too. Is that is there any particular
It just seems to be stressing to me.
Okay, all right.
That's how I see it. Is that how y'all see it? It seems like he's kind of just stressing at this point.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was coming from someone else.
Sometimes uses italics for sarcasm, but this is just
if anyone is curious, the emphasis goes, it is not only impermissible to allow the forces of the proletariat to be divided, but it is impermissible and criminal to allow any slackening of the work of establishing the united front. So that's the emphasize.
Yeah.
Or the emphasis in the italics for anyone curious. specifically. So, like, yeah, I mean, it just seems like your standard like no allowance for deviationism from the people's cause.
Yeah, I actually mentioned this. The People's Front. Yeah, there is a Fatherland Front and a People's Front in Ukraine that's totally fashy.
Oh yeah, there's a Lenin quote that goes that speaks to a similar logic here, which was there's no third path between bourgeois and proletarian ideology. So to deviate from socialism to even the slightest degree is to strengthen bourgeois ideology.
Barbar, and if we want to synthesize it with Rosa Luxemburg, would just say it's to
Yeah,
barbarism.
yeah, socialism or barbarism. Basically, that's what he's talking about here, but in extremely immediate, practical, like guns in your face terms.
Yeah.
Definitely. So the working class must no longer tolerate a situation where, at a time when in Spain the socialist and communist workers are fighting and dying together at the front, defending not only the liberty and democracy of the Spanish people, but the democracy and culture of the whole of Europe against fascist barbarism. There are to be found leaders of the Second Socialist International who bring all their influence to bear to widen the split in the proletarian ranks. At a time when the fascist rebels in Spain are slaughtering socialist and communist workers who are fighting shoulder to shoulder at the front, when they are spreading death and destruction throughout the country, the leadership of the Socialist International persistently refuses to organize aid for the Spanish people jointly with the Communist International. There are a number of countries with social democratic governments or coalition governments in which social democratic ministers, leaders of the social democratic parties and of the Socialist International are taking part. But not only do these governments not make common cause with the Soviet Union in its position on the Spanish question, the only position which is in accord with the interests of the Spanish people and with the cause of the defense of democracy and peace, but by the manner in which they act, they lend support to the hypocritical policy of non-intervention and actually hinder the cause of effective resistance to the fascist interventionists and murderers of the Spanish people.
I hate that when I hear the question, like the Spanish question or the woman's question or anything prior to World War II, when I hear the question, it now just makes me feel like the bad question.
Yeah, the final solution to the Jewish question.
Like you read all this stuff and you like that's how they always pose things. So once again, probably something that was stolen from the left. Using those
I think it was just a common way back then to abbreviate things.
Yeah, how it really works like now. So like you have like they have like in especially in like emancipatory and liberatory theory, you have like the national question, the woman question, and all that is like if you word it like that, the question, or like even like way back and say the Jewish question, it's not inherently it has some bad connotations, but like really once it got like bad, they started phrasing it as the Jewish problem.
Yeah, and then they called it the final solution to
the Jewish problem.
Yeah.
So question good, problem bad. Like that's kind of how it breaks down now. But like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like there's this I posted about a while ago. There's this freaking service where you can like ask rabbis questions, and they call this My Jewish Question. And it's like they probably could have kicked that around the focus group a little more.
Yeah.
Like I mean it's not
Ask the rabbi.
Yeah, they could have asked a rabbi about that. Like, would my Jewish question like be like the
Weird?
best thing we could call this? Could we not just call it Ask a Fucking Rabbi?
Yeah, ask the rabbi.
And people today still use that sentiment that you were talking about, that feeling you get from hearing that, on whoever question. They use that today without ever cracking open the piece or reading it. Marx is on the Jewish question to call him anti-Semitic.
But he was Jewish.
Yeah, and plus, like they overlook the fact that it's a response to a piece written by an actual anti-Semite named Bruno Bauer.
Okay.
The response to Proudhon was the poverty of philosophy.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, because he wrote Philosophy of Poverty, and so then he flipped it.
Yeah. So Marx's On the Jewish Question was written in response to Bruno Bauer, who was an actual anti-Semite. He wrote a piece called The Jewish Question, and so like the passage from Marx that people love to yank from its context is the whole thing about Judaism becoming like the religion of hucksterism, for like in terms of like assimilation or something like that. But like the point he's making in the broader context that they cleave out of the piece is what he's saying is by their own anti-Semitic standards.
Wait.
What?
YouTube. Oh, phew.
What?
Okay, so they removed our video fast forward to fascism.
Wait, what?
It's okay. I
actually thought this video was taken down, but it was another video.
Yeah.
Ah, boo.
I'm like one with Esh's mind now, which is
Thank
really
you.
scary.
Nice. That must be.
I got scared for a second.
So with on the Jewish question, when like Marx talks about like Jews becoming hucksters or whatever, and they use this out of context to see Marx was an anti-Semite. No, like what he's actually saying in the broader context of the piece is that by their own anti-Semitic standards, the world's bourgeoisie have already become the Jews. So it's basically an elaborate way of saying like what we do now, that like every accusation is a confession, like coming from the bourgeoisie. Like
they became the stereotype they created.
Yes, exactly. Or like they are the stereotype, so they projected it onto their scapegoats. So
Thank you for reading my mind, Janet, by the way.
I read your mind when you're not even here, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, because it just caused me to panic for a quick second because I thought they took down our stream, which they have done in the past.
All right, so you want to keep going?
Yeah, let's continue.
Of course.
I forgot where we were, though.
You know where we are, MJ? We're of course, the responsibility for this. Okay.
Of course, the responsibility for this policy, which is most detrimental to the interests of the world proletariat, lies with the socialist leaders who are carrying it out. But it would be against the historical truth if we were to keep silent concerning that share of responsibility which falls upon all leaders and members of the Socialist and Amsterdam Internationals. For the leaders speak and act on their behalf as their representatives. Inasmuch as they allow such a policy to be pursued, they cannot disclaim responsibility for it. They must become cognizant of the common duty history places upon them, together with the communists, to do everything to bar the way against fascism and to safeguard peace. In the formation and extension of the People's Front of Struggle against Fascism and War, the greatest significance is attached to the united front of the working class itself in the main capitalist countries, to united action on the part of the Communist and Social Democratic parties, as well as the trade unions of different political tendencies, and on the international arena, to joint action of the Communist and Socialist and Amsterdam International. All obstacles in the way of this united action must be removed as rapidly as possible. To this end, the Communist parties and all supporters of proletarian unity and the People's Front in the rank of the Socialist and Amsterdam Internationals have a tremendous amount of intensive daily activity ahead of them. The Seventh Congress of the Communist International was fully aware of the fact that it is no simple task to put an end to the split in the ranks of the working class. All that the enemies of the working class, their agents and henchmen, have done over the course of long decades for the purpose of dividing the forces of the working people cannot be eliminated with a wave of the hand and by mere wishes. Our whole experience since the Congress has shown still more clearly that the road to united action on the part of the working class nationally and on an international scale is far from being a straight, smooth, paved road. It is a pretty hard zigzag road, often thorny and steep. Open and covert enemies of unity never cease to throw up different kinds of obstacles and barriers along the road. Every step has to be taken after great effort by stubborn work and struggle. There are the misguided ones who have things so that they may become convinced. There are the waivers and those of little faith who have to be urged on all the time. There are saboteurs and double dealers who must be ruthlessly exposed. There is a persistent struggle to be waged against the cunning sophists, the crafty politicians, and practiced demagogues who do their utmost to persuade the rank and file, the politically inexperienced workers, that 2 times 2 are not 4, but 3. And that the united front of the working class does not increase their power, but only leads to increased fascist aggression. And at the same time, it is necessary to be on guard against falling prey to the provocative maneuvers of the enemies of unity, but untiringly to extend a brotherly hand to all organizations of the working people, inviting them to joint struggle, even when they have avowed opponents of unity at their head. For every communist, every class-conscious worker must not forget for a minute that the opponents of unity and of the international proletariat would be extremely gratified if, in the face of their sabotage and provocation, the communists themselves would give up the struggle for unity and refrain from consistently carrying out the People's Front policy. This would only make it easier for these leaders to carry on in their role as splitters and would save them for the time being, from the severe verdict of the proletariat and of history. We must know how to carry on an unabated ideological struggle against reformism and other anti-Marxist tendencies in the ranks of the working class movement, and at the same time fight persistently for the establishment of the United People's Front and carefully avoid any disruption of united action in the daily struggle against fascism and war. 22 years ago, on the eve of the world imperialist war, when he was gathering together the forces of the working class for the coming struggle for socialism, The great Lenin spoke of the tremendous importance of unity in the ranks of the proletariat. Lenin says, the
Go ahead.
The workers do need unity. And the thing that must be understood above all else is that apart from the workers themselves, no one will give them unity. No one is in a position to help their unity. Unity cannot be promised. That would be an empty boast, self-deception. Unity cannot be created out of agreement between little groups of intellectuals. This is an error of the saddest, most naive, and ignorant type. Unity must be won, and only by the workers themselves. The class-conscious workers themselves are capable of achieving this by stubborn and persistent work. Nothing is easier than to write the word unity in letters a yard high, to promise unity, to proclaim oneself to an adherent of unity. But in reality, unity can only be advanced by work and the organization of the advanced workers, of all class-conscious workers. This is not easy. It requires work, persistence, the rallying together of all class-conscious workers. But without such work, there is no use in talking of the unity of workers. From Vladimir Lenin, Collected Works, numbers.
That is such a liberal. The unity thing is such a
People love
thing.
I know. Yeah, I like the idea that unity must be one. Yes, it's not something that just happens just because you put a little sign that says united.
Yeah, Nkrumah had a point about this, which is unity presupposes organization. And that's basically what's being elaborated on here, is because this stubborn and persistent work happens within an organized body. So, there are steps to achieving this. So, okay, should I read this last part?
Go ahead.
All right. The whole course of events since the 7th Congress of the Communist International provides indisputable confirmation of the vital necessity of the earliest possible realization of its historic slogans regarding working class unity and the People's Front of struggle against the worst enemy of mankind, fascism. The Communist International and the Communist parties of the various countries, backed by the masses of the working people, will not cease for one moment to exert all their power in the fight to bring about this unity. They will not fall prey to any provocation whatsoever directed toward widening the split in the ranks of the working class and breaking up the People's Front. And despite the opposition of the saboteurs and the socialists and Amsterdam internationals, the world proletariat will bring about its militant unity. In the struggle against fascism and war, not empty words, not platonic wishes, but action is needed. To achieve this action, it is necessary to bring about the unification of all the forces of the working class and to carry out unswervingly the policy of the People's Front.
Oh, and that we did very good on time too. But to me, this is not just the only one. I really like his other ones, like Fascism is War, and all his, actually every one of Georgi Dimitrov's pieces is full of wisdom. What do you think, MJ?
Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite ones is, it's over here, is the United Front, or also you might know it as the Fascist Offensive and the Task of the Communist International.
Yeah, that's what I know.
That's the piece that I thought we were going to be reading today, actually.
That's a book. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have MJ on and we will go through that. And we'll probably have to do that in a few episodes, right?
We should talk about that one at some point too, because I want to run through some translation things that had me raising my eyebrows about it.
I don't speak Bulgarian.
If you speak Russian, that's close enough. We can figure it out.
Okay.
That's not a joke, by the way. Russian and Bulgarian are fairly similar.
Except Bulgarian has these extra letters that I can't read.
Oh well, we can figure that out like
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about that like too much, but yeah. So it's weird as like Bulgarian, Polish, and Russian are all surprisingly similar, more similar to each other than Ukrainian and Russian. Ukrainian is more like Belarusian.
Exactly.
uh,
By the way, MJ, so where can people find you?
TikTok or YouTube. Your Commie Dad is my handle now. I switched it from Read Dimitrov because I realized that I was going to have to explain to people who Dimitrov was before I could get them to read him. Like, not enough people know who that is. They just see Read Dimitrov and confused.
Yeah.
But we're going to fix them.
So yeah, we're gonna put a link down below. And yeah, we should definitely
And you,
organize another few episodes with
yeah,
you. So that-
definitely.
Yeah.
I never get this. Follow me on Twitter at uncle_authority.
yeah.
Right.
No one should follow me anywhere because I'm just nuts.
Yeah. So with that, I will say, Svobodu narodu, smrti fašizmu.
Slava Leninu.
Patty.